Slate Breakdown. I'm Jason Gilbo at JGilbo11. With me is Russell Clay at Russell J. Clay. We're looking at tonight's 8-game slate, the 7:05 and later games, and we looked over the pitching pod, and it was you and I, and we weren't a fan of really anyone. And that usually means good offense, but overall, this slate is just it's an ugly one.
Yeah, it's an ugly one. I think for the most part, you're obviously avoiding cash games because we talked about the pitchers. Check that out if you haven't. But yeah, even in terms of stacking, there are a few good options, but in terms of tournaments, it's going to be tough to sort of figure out that stack or those individual players that are really going to set you apart. So we'll run through it and try to give you guys a good handle on it. But this is going to be an interesting one for sure.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how live construction goes, one for myself, and also just really overall everyone else to see where they're going to really attack. Mm-hmm. Are they going to pay up for Sale against the Twins, who's very expensive, who has been very good this season, but also you do look at the Twins' track record against him. He has rarely paid off that price tag against Minnesota.
Right, and that's just one of the main storylines to follow, obviously.
Yeah, definitely. And jumping right into things, 7:05. Athletics Orioles. This is game 2 of a doubleheader. That first one does start at 1:05, so we should be getting lineups out in time for that game 2, which is nice to see because you're probably gonna see maybe a guy or two out of the lineup that was in game 1. So, looking at this game, it's obviously a favorable ballpark there in Camden Yards, lefties and righties, mainly for left-handers, which puts kind of really that Oakland stack we were talking about them, kind of a cheap and well necessarily not a huge power team. They are in play against a guy like Mike Wright in this ballpark. I think definitely they're kind of one of my favorite options.
Right, and they're one of my favorite stacks of the night in terms of potentially using a 1 through 5. Obviously, Mike Wright's a weaker, one of the weaker pitchers on the slate. So if you're sort of initially taking a look just at lineups that maybe you want to target, there is actually some cheaper players in Vaught and maybe Jed Lowry as well. So definitely some interesting options in that lineup.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Right, small sample size, 403 WOBA allowed to lefties in his time. He doesn't miss any bats, 30% hard ball rate, 1.97 home runs per 9. So that kind of says all you need to know about why we're looking at some A's today.
Definitely.
And on that Orioles side, you do have a better quality arm, Jesse Hahn there. But still, I think the usual suspects are in play for Baltimore, as they always are. Guys like Manny Machado, Chris Davis, an interesting play there. Davis always a guy who I'm looking at in GPPs just because his strikeout rate is still through the roof. And one other guy I still think is Mark Trumbo, even against right-handers with how he's doing this season.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think it's a high upside group of players, obviously, and you're obviously not afraid of Rich Hill, so. Or Han. Yeah.
Han Hill,
any H, whatever. I think in terms of just looking at this slate in general, the Orioles have some of the higher upside bats regardless. So yeah, kind of looking at them for more individual players though than I think fully going all in on them for me.
Yeah, I'm definitely in agreement there. Next game, I got Twins and White Sox, and this is that Chris Sale game over under 7. Irvin Santana. This is something to consider, I think, on the Twins side. Yes, they've kind of had his number. They could be a stack because I still think it is going to be underowned because it is Chris Sale and the name that he brings. Obviously, it's not something that's you're going to shoot for and expect a ton of production from, but it is something that if you're building multiple lineups, maybe a toss one in.
Yeah, I think that's pretty intriguing and pretty cheap. So definitely something I'm looking at to be a little contrarian maybe.
Yeah, definitely. On the other side, you can pick on Irvin Santana. I think more so from the left side with this team. Looking at a guy like Adam Eaton, we've been kind of riding that train for a little while here. Melky Cabrera is another name just because Santana really average against left-handers, 337 will be allowed. So those two names step up. Obviously, Abreu is really heating up as well.
Yep, and I mean even Todd Frazier is below 4K, so at least on DraftKings. So that group's pretty intriguing to me.
Yeah, definitely. Next one, 7:10. You got Diamondbacks and Braves. Shelby Miller versus Julio Teheran. Over under 7.5. Atlanta strong for decent favorites there. Turner Field, not the best place for offense. I'm not expecting a ton of production, but there are some exploitable weaknesses, with lefties against Tigran. A guy who stands out to me is still David Peralta, just a solid guy who hits right-handed pitching well, and if that's his struggle, I think Peralta's a guy who, at his price tag, is going to be a guy I really focus in on.
Right. And yeah, Segura as well up on that top there. I don't know. It's kind of they're more of a contrarian stack, not something you're looking at. As we mentioned, you're not really looking at cash in the first place, but sort of just 1 out of 10 lineups maybe if you're throwing it in there. Not something I'm super confident in.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And on that Atlanta side, you were talking about Freddie Freeman possibly being a sneaky GPP option.
Yeah, I think as a standalone play, obviously the rest of his team around him is struggling mightily, but I think he has a pretty good shot against Shelby Miller here to get, at least a few hits or something. Maybe not a home run, but a few hits, maybe an RBI or something.
Yeah, Miller's been dreadful. Going back to last year, 325 WOBA to lefties, 33% hard ball rate. So you can look at a guy like Freeman certainly in GPPs.
Mm-hmm.
Next one, Brewers and Reds. This one has some weather concerns, which is a little bit disappointing just because we do think there's going to be a good amount of runs here. And if things do clear up, obviously you're looking at both sides. And I think really the lefties for Cincinnati, they're really stand out against Nelson, who's allowed a 363 WOBA since last year with a 1.61 home run per 9.
Yeah, this Reds team just isn't really disappointing very often right now. So I'm kind of in on at least some of their players. Brandon Phillips is still cheap, Billy Hamilton cheap, Cozart cheap. So I think you can make some pretty interesting lineups, maybe even as those guys as standalone, especially Cozart and Phillips.
And it's kind of odd. You're looking at the Reds line prices. They've dropped on DraftKings. Votto's 4,000, Bruce 3,800. It's a little bit odd, but hey, it's another cheaper stack. I think if weather cooperates here, they come in as my favorite stack of the night.
Right.
On the opposite side, Brandon Finnegan going to be facing a heavy right-handed team, and I think Jonathan Villar, Ryan Braun, Luke Roy, Chris Carter very much in play.
Yeah, and I think this is a stack if you want to go with these guys. If you're going Braun, maybe throw in a Villar as well. I think that's an interesting combination together as a stack.
Yeah, definitely. Finnegan, 1.48 home runs per 9 to right-handed bats. So in that ballpark, it's very favorable from both sides.
Right.
Next one here, you got Mariners and Astros, 8.5 over/under. Dallas Keuchel versus Nate Karns. Really like this game as far as the Houston side goes. You're looking at Karns, who is a home run prone at times, and obviously a Houston team that really has all the power in the world.
Right. It's such a strong top 3 right now. They're all doing so well right now. I think it's a viable stack, even if they're getting pretty expensive. So that's an unfortunate byproduct of doing well, but I still think they're in play even at their prices.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Springer, Correa, kind of their usual. Altuve off to a hell of a start to the season, and up over 5K on there. So he's a guy who I think, because of the price tag, is GPP only for me. Obviously, maybe even not, because as we mentioned, if you are building cash lineups, I think Altuve is probably going to fit into your lineups just because pitching is rather weak as far as pricing goes. But if you want to get kind of a little bit different, you can look at Colby Rasmus, Evan Gattis, and kind of swerve off some of those names who also have tremendous power, but also a little bit lower floor.
Yeah.
So on the other side of things, obviously Dallas Keuchel hasn't been great this season, facing a heavily left-handed lineup. I think Nelson Cruz is the only one in play for me just because he just absolutely mashes left-handers.
Yeah, I really like him. Even as a cash play, I think he's really solid, a really solid guy to pay up for.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Moving on to this next game here, Phillies and Marlins, over-under of 8. Jeremy Hellickson, Tom Kohler. I'm not really looking at the Philly side of things, but looking at the Marlins, I think against Hellickson, certainly in play. Looking at guys from that left side, Dietrich, Christian Yelich, just because Hellickson's allowed a 346 WOBA since 2015, struggle with lefties.
Yeah, that's pretty intriguing. Again, I'm pretty lukewarm on this game as well from both sides. But I do like those calls as sort of potentially value guys.
Yeah, definitely. And I think Stanton's a guy who, if I'm paying up, it's probably going to be for Stanton. Uh,
Hmm.
he's expensive, but he's going up against Hellickson, who's just not a good pitcher. 1.65 runs per nine, two right-handed bats. That just screams a Stanton homer. I mean, it just does. I know it's expensive, but it just screams that he's
Yeah,
going yard.
right. So you'd probably go him over Altuve.
Yeah, I think so. Just because I
Hmm.
think Brandon Phillips is at a much cheaper option and still in a really good spot.
Right. Yeah,
So,
I like that call. Yeah.
and I think anyone else, I mean, JT Realmuto, cheap catcher option leading off is kind of the other honorable mention there.
Hmm.
So, I guess one name, if from the Philly side, Michael Franco still the usual honorable mention. Just
Right.
because,
I think we've thrown him out there a few times, and I think from the three spot, I mean, he's only 3,400 on DraftKings, so definitely intriguing.
yeah. Next one here, you got Mets and Padres, Bartolo Colon, James Shields.
Hmm.
Over under a 7. You and I, this is probably the one we actually like the most in as a whole as far as pitching
Yeah.
goes. Not picking on the Padres or picking on Bartolo Colon there because one, I'll be using Bartolo heavily,
Right.
heavily.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the theory. If you're playing Cologne, you probably don't want to load up on Padres. So he's going to be in most of my lineups. So I'm probably not going to have many Padres shares. And I mean, in general, they're weak anyway. So is that kind of your take on it as well?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think if anything from this game, it's going to be Mets lefties for me.
Hmm.
Petco, not a bad place for left-handed power. It's not a great one either, but it's not like right-handers. And with Shields, he's shown weakness against lefties, especially last season. And then
Hmm.
dating back to last year, 1.87 horns per nine, 363 WOBA. So you look at these guys, I think Conforto is still pretty cheap. Obviously, we've been riding that train for a while. Granderson's price is down. Cespedes not that bad either due to Walker. So I think they are in play. If you want to get really weird and do a stack with them, because I think really this option is if that Reds Brewers game gets taken off, there's no
Yeah,
obvious spot.
I actually like that as a contrarian sort of play. I don't think they're going to be high owned because people are going to look at Shields and kind of shy away. But I actually do like that. I think there's some potential there.
Yeah, definitely. Last game of the night here, you got Angels and Rays, Jake Odorizzi, Jared Weaver.
Hmm.
Um, not really looking to pick on Odorizzi there. Um, Obviously, anytime Mike Trout's playing, he's certainly always worth a look because he's arguably the best player in baseball. Odorizzi, fly ball pitcher. Kind of another honorable mention as usual. If he's even considered honorable at this point, he's a top guy.
Right.
But you were looking at the Rays as possibly one of the cheaper stacks on the night that kind of are worth a look.
Yeah, I mean, Jared Weaver just has really struggled this year, and he's really struggled for a while now. So I think he's someone we can target pretty confidently. I think Vegas is in Tampa's favor, and I just like the beginning. It's super cheap, that sort of front of that Rays lineup. So I think that's all positive right there. One of the few things that's just all indicators are positive for the Rays lineup from what I'm seeing.
Yeah, definitely. Weaver struggles against lefties. 343 Wobo allowed 1.44 home runs per nine since 2015. And I think overall you're definitely on with that lineup. Forsythe, Brad Miller, Longoria, Dickerson.
Mhm.
I know Dickerson's struggling, but he's still a guy who I'm going to roll out there against bad pitching, especially at those prices.
And if you can stack sort of the front four of this, I think you can fit a Giancarlo Stanton or something like that. One of those higher priced guys or an Altuve or something like that. So definitely look at that.
Yeah, it's definitely a good call. You can piece that in with bigger, higher ceiling guys than those four right there.
Hmm.
So, that's going to wrap things up with the slate breakdown. Check out dailyfantasycafe.com for all our great tools and content.